In August 2001, BE Incorporated was gone, the technology sold to Palm, and the operating system that once almost became the future of the Macintosh was officially dead. But BeOS didn't disappear. An unfinished version of BeOS leaked onto the internet. A German company even attempted to commercialize the platform under highly questionable legal circumstances. Then, a small community decided to simply recreate the entire operating system from scratch and called it Haiku. This is what happened after BeOS. Obsolete computer technology is my passion. I'm the vintage collector, and these are my stories. Palm had acquired BE Inc. with the intention of using its technology as the foundation for a next-generation Palm operating system, later known as PalmOS 6 or PalmOS Cobalt. But while Palm was attempting to integrate parts of BeOS into its own platform, something unexpected happened. An unfinished development build of BeOS began circulating on the internet in January 2002. Known as BeOS R5.1, or by its codename Dano, this build represented the next step BE had been working on before the company shut down. For enthusiasts, it became a glimpse of what BeOS might have evolved into. On the surface, it exposed some changes on the UI, including a theme manager. Under the hood, some of the APIs, the so-called kits, saw changes, and also a network stack, the so-called Bone, short for the BeOS networking environment, was introduced. Dano was likely built on the source code that was reportedly leaked 2 months prior in October 2001. While it was quickly taken down again, some people had glimpses at it, also reporting that some files, especially important makefiles to conduct a build, were in fact missing. At the same time, the community began experimenting with another approach. Some enthusiasts started modifying the BeOS 5 Personal Edition. They bundled updated drivers, games and application software into a single distribution and called it BeOS PE Max. The tracker and deskbar, components of the original BeOS user interface which had been open sourced by the year 2000, were modified to resemble the Windows taskbar and start menu, providing a more familiar user interface. Multiple releases had been made over time, with the latest one, BeOS PE Max Edition version 4 Beta 1, remaining unfinished. Some sources claim that this distribution technically violated the BeOS Personal Edition license, which allowed redistribution only in unmodified form. So while hobbyists were extending the existing system, others attempted something more ambitious. In early 2004, the German company yellowTAB announced Zeta. The name itself hinted at its ambitions. Zeta is the Greek word for 6, suggesting this would effectively become the successor to BeOS 5. To further promote the platform and its ecosystem, the company also published a short-lived companion magazine called ZMag. Naturally, I wanted to see what this supposed successor actually looked like, so I tried booting Zeta 1.0 inside 86box. That turned out to be quite a hassle. The system repeatedly crashed early during boot, and in VirtualBox I couldn't even get that far. There, it stalled already at the bootloader. After some experimentation with different hardware configurations in 86box and by bringing up the boot options by pressing the spacebar early during a startup, I eventually managed to reach the installer, although initially only in grayscale VGA mode. The installer itself appears to be a new development, but the overall user interface styling clearly gives it away. Zeta looked suspiciously similar to the leaked BeOS R5.1 Dano builds, suggesting that it was either based directly on that leaked release or possibly even on the leaked source code. Naturally, the legal status quickly became a topic of debate. Questions emerged about whether yellowTAB actually had the rights to distribute the system at all. Critics also pointed out that many of the improvements advertised in Zeta appear to originate from community-developed patches and software rather than from new proprietary development. Zeta was also frequently criticized for not delivering on many of its promised features, and the system itself was often described as unstable and buggy. Speaking of bugs, I'm not entirely sure whether this window simply refusing to close qualifies as one.
Auf der ältesten Hardware, auch auf super neuen Computern. In 15 Minuten installiert mit Word, mit Excel, mit E-Mail, mit Kopierprogramm, mit allem, Bildbearbeitung, Video. Ich habe mal ein paar Videos im Hintergrund gerade laufen. Ja. Es läuft auf jedem Computer dieser Welt.
yellowTAB later released Zeta 1.2, but I couldn't get that one to boot either. Once again, I ran into the multi-session CD issue we already discussed in the previous episode. The error message, however, nicely reveals that there is still plenty of BeOS inside and not all references had been renamed to Zeta. I then tried another copy of version 1.21, which at least included a proper cue sheet. That version did boot, but beyond that it looked more like a live CD and it didn't come with an installer. Because of that, I was also unable to explore the later Zeta 1.5 release. The only images I could find were patch upgraders from 1.2 to 1.5 rather than full installable CDs. In 2007, Access, the Japanese company that had acquired the BeOS intellectual property through its purchase of PhosphurOS for $324 million in 2005, publicly stated that yellowTAB did not have legal rights to the BeOS source code. yellowTAB repeatedly ignored cease and desist letters. But eventually, development of Zeta stopped after Magnussoft, the company distributing Zeta on behalf of yellowTAB, withdrew the product due to its unclear legal status. With the legal situation unresolved and development coming to a halt, the era of so-called official BeOS successors was effectively over. But the experimentation around BeOS didn't stop there. Rewinding back to 2004, another unofficial and legally questionable rebuild of BeOS briefly appeared. It was called PhosphurOS and it was based on the leaked BeOS 5.1 Dano release. To install it, I actually had to boot from the original Dano boot floppy first. PhosphurOS itself appears to have evolved from an earlier experimental rebuild known as Super Dano, presumably created by the same developer and already based on the leaked Dano release. Its user interface was a clear departure from the classic BeOS look, but it was built entirely on the theme system that had been introduced with Dano. Once installed, PhosphurOS immediately tries to establish its own personality, starting with heavily modified and rather nerdy boot screens. That theme continues once the desktop appears, even exposing a launch bar along the bottom of the screen. Like BeOS 5 PE Max, the system bundled a number of popular open source applications along. As for the creator of PhosphurOS himself, there's some dispute whether he ever was or was not a developer at yellowTAB. Anyways, the project disappeared almost as quickly as it had appeared. But examples like this show just how eager the community was to keep the spirit of BeOS alive. And that desire had already begun to take shape a few years earlier. In 2001, members of the BeOS developer community started a project called OpenBeOS. Instead of modifying the original system or relying on leaked source code, their goal was far more ambitious: to rebuild BeOS entirely from scratch, avoiding the legal issues surrounding the original codebase. And yet, a few small pieces of the original BeOS code could legally live on inside the new project. BE Inc. had open sourced part of the original BeOS desktop, namely the deskbar and the tracker file manager. These components therefore became the only parts of the original BeOS user interface that could be reused in Haiku, and apparently also made their way into yellowTAB's Zeta. In 2004, the project was renamed to Haiku, marking the transition from an idea into a real operating system project. One of the most critical components on that journey was the kernel. The project adopted a new kernel called NewOS, written by Travis Geiselbrecht, who had also been one of the key engineers behind the original BeOS kernel. A central design goal of Haiku was compatibility with the original BeOS system. The developers aimed for both source and binary compatibility. Source compatibility means that the software originally written for BeOS can be recompiled for Haiku with little or no modification, since Haiku reimplements the BeOS application programming interface, the so-called kits. To achieve binary compatibility, the Haiku developers carefully recreated the original system libraries and interfaces, ensuring that the behavior and memory layouts match those expected by BeOS programs. The result is, as you can see here, that I can bring forward an old BeOS application and run it on Haiku without any issues. Support for x86-64 systems then arrived in 2012. The introduction of 64-bit support, however, breaks the binary compatibility mentioned earlier, since legacy BeOS applications were compiled as 32-bit binaries. On the modern 64 builds of Haiku, these older binaries will therefore refuse to run. Haiku's primary development platform today is x86, which currently holds Tier 1 status in the project. In the early days, there was also an attempt to bring Haiku to PowerPC hardware. However, that port was never completed, and despite occasional efforts to revive it, there's still no working PowerPC build today. Support for other architectures does exist in various experimental forms. Development for ARM, for example, is still in its early stages. Perhaps one day we may even see Haiku running on Apple Silicon. More than 2 decades later, the ideas behind BeOS are still alive, now carried forward by Haiku. And just as BeOS once ran on PowerMax in the 90s, Haiku today runs on Intel Macs from the 2000s. And yes, it does run, but that's a story for next time. How about you? Did you ever run BeOS 5 PE Max, PhosphurOS or even Zeta back in the day? Let me know down in the comments, and if you enjoy these retro operating system deep dives, consider subscribing so you don't miss out the next part. Next time we're going to take this 2009 Mac Mini and see what it actually takes to get Haiku on real hard. Whoa! I'm the Vintage Collector, and this was my story for today. Thanks for watching, and see you again next Sunday.